guys, and welcome to Steps, Exercise 6. For those of you who don't know what Steps is, essentially it is a series of videos I have been doing on cultivating your creativity and helping you with idea generation and things of that nature. In order to complete this exercise in the context of the series, you really only need to have completed exercise 2, in which we created a self-portrait. As usual, the other exercises will come in handy in the future, and it is possible to play with the concepts outlined in this video using other artwork you have created instead of a self-portrait specifically. In order to expand on that point a little bit, what we are going to be doing in this exercise is altering a piece of artwork we have created previously. Personally, I feel as though this is a good way to experiment with different options, directions you could have taken something but didn't, and it helps you to think creatively and outside the box. If you want to try this exercise with another piece of artwork, simply take another portrait that you did, perhaps a page from a sketchbook, and use that instead. Now, getting into the actual exercise itself, the first step is going to be to photocopy your portrait so that you have multiple copies to work with. If you don't have a photocopier, you can use the original, though I would recommend tracing or making physical copies instead. My reasoning for this is simply that having multiple versions of the same or a very similar portrait takes a lot of the pressure off and allows us to experiment more freely without the fear of messing up. If you always have another copy sitting by the side, then you will be able to work with your creativity and not worry about completely ruining whichever one you're working on. You will be able to take more risks, and ultimately that's the element of creativity that we're trying to experiment with in this video. Then we are simply going to take those copies and start altering them. You can do this in many different ways, and the examples that I'm going to be giving in this video are just the tip of the iceberg. With my first example, I simply added line work. My original self-portrait didn't have any hard ink lines. It was part of my experimentation process. I used a water-soluble pencil instead. I was simply curious about what this piece would look like if it had line art that was similar to how I typically approach my work. And ultimately, it changed the feeling of the piece drastically. The original was a little more soft, a little more gentle, and I personally feel as though the line work gave it a lot more emotion and attitude than it had before. Now, with my second example, I decided to go for more of a quote-unquote punk vibe, adding tattoos and piercings and things of that nature. I tend to really enjoy adding these types of elements to my portraits, and to a certain extent this was just me daydreaming a little bit. I really want to get a tattoo, and I only have my ears pierced, and I really like other types of piercings. So it's just a kind of aesthetic that I'm very attracted to, and so I tend to work with it a lot in my artwork. And since this was a self-portrait, it was just kind of my way of playing around with that idea without actually committing to any of it. The third and final example that I am showing in this video, I didn't really have an idea in mind for, except that I wanted to use a white gel pen to doodle in the hair. In my first example, I used just my regular pens to add line work in the way that I typically do hair. And I wanted to try something a little bit different, which is why I end up adding dots inside of the strands of hair in some areas. I also ended up adding jewelry to this example, as well as kind of intricate makeup. This was more of a doodly type example than anything else. I wanted to play with lines, and I wanted to have fun with it above all else. Though I don't do any examples like this in the video, you can change the drawing even more drastically than this if you so desire. As I mentioned in my video on using digital stamps, lowering the opacity opens so many possibilities because it allows you to draw over top of lines or shapes that already exist, and it makes it a lot easier to actually work on top of it. You can add hats, you can give the character or self-portrait a new hairstyle by adding bangs or lengthening the hair. You can give different necklines to the clothing that they're wearing, or anything else that you can think of. For this exercise, I'm going to recommend that you do at least 3 different examples if you can. This may seem a little intense, but this video only took me about 40 minutes to actually record the footage for. And if it's the ideas that you're worried about, it's very likely that you will keep coming up with new ideas as you work. This is kind of the concept I'm trying to get you guys to experience through this series of videos. Even though I only did 3 examples, I actually came up with 5 separate ideas in addition to these 3. And if this ends up happening to you, and you've already done your 3 examples, and you don't really want to do them right away, what I want you to do is write them down on a post-it note or an index card or just a scrap of paper, and keep it in an envelope that you keep with your creativity journal that we made previously in this series. And that is actually going to lead into a little side exercise for this video, and that is to simply start writing your ideas down. These can literally be any ideas. It can be drawing ideas, it can be writing ideas, it can be a list of books that you want to read, it can be notes for a project that you're working on. Any idea that you have, I want you to start writing it down and keeping it with your journal or sketchbook for this course. As I mentioned, these will come into play in a later video, so just start collecting them, start keeping them, and I will let you know more about that at a later date. So I hope you guys have fun with this exercise. That's really the purpose of steps, is to get you to have fun with your creativity and let ideas generate naturally. And if you want to share what you have done with other people that are also participating in this little workshop class series thing, there is a Facebook group, and I will leave a link to it in the description. So thank you guys so much for watching. You can subscribe if you want, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.